It's pretty wild when you think about it. From ancient Mesopotamia to the Amazon rainforest, from the mountains of the Philippines to the river valleys of China, it seems like almost every culture on Earth has a story about a great world-ending flood. And that brings up one massive question.
I mean, really, why this story? How on earth did so many completely unconnected cultures all come up with such similar tales about a global deluge, a few lucky survivors, and a world basically washed clean to start over? To get to the bottom of this, we're going to tackle this mystery from 3 different angles. Is this whole flood myth thing a kind of distant memory of a real-life catastrophe? Or is it more of a moral fable, a story about sin and punishment? Or could it be a powerful metaphor for destruction and starting fresh? All right, let's start with a version that probably comes to mind for most of us, the stories from the ancient Near East, where the flood is basically a judgment call handed down from the heavens. So in these foundational myths, the basic idea is we're the problem. In the Mesopotamian story, we humans just got too numerous, too loud. And in the Bible, we became wicked. Either way, the gods, or God, decide the only real solution is to just hit the cosmic reset button. And the overlap here, wow, it's pretty incredible. The Epic of Gilgamesh is actually older than the biblical story of Genesis, but check out how similar the structure is. In both, a single good guy gets chosen, he's given divine instructions to build a giant boat, and his job is to survive and repopulate the world. The key virtue here isn't being strong or clever, it's just listening and doing what you're told. It's all about obedience.
But what if the hero didn't just passively float around and wait for the water to go down? What if the hero fought back? Well, over in ancient China, we find a totally different kind of flood story and a completely different kind of hero.
So let me introduce you to Yu the engineer. When the floodwaters rise in the Chinese myth, there's no building a boat, there's no waiting for a divine rescue. Yu's story isn't about escaping the disaster. It's about defeating it with pure human ingenuity and a whole lot of hard work. This story is championing a totally different set of values. Yu doesn't build an ark, he builds infrastructure. He spends 13 long years studying the land, dredging new channels for the rivers, and he works so hard he supposedly doesn't even stop to visit his own family. This isn't about faith, it's about engineering, dedication, and saving your community. So when you put these 2 heroes side by side, the contrast is just stunning. You've got Noah, the survivor, who waits for God's plan and saves his family, and then you have Yu, the hero, who takes matters into his own hands and saves the entire nation. One story is all about faithful obedience, the other is about practical problem solving and tireless effort. Okay, so we've got divine punishment and human engineering on the table. But hang on, there's a third major way to see this whole flood thing. For that, let's turn to some traditions from indigenous American cultures, which give us a completely different spin on the story. You see, in a lot of these narratives, the flood doesn't happen just because humans are wicked in some general way. It's much more specific. It's about breaking a taboo, or showing disrespect, or somehow disrupting the harmony between people and nature. The flood is the world's natural response to that relationship being thrown out of whack. So the whole point isn't just surviving the flood. It's about what comes after, healing. The story becomes about ecological restoration, about fixing that broken relationship with the world. It's a powerful reminder that humans and nature are supposed to be family, not enemies. Okay, so we've looked at 3 very different kinds of flood stories. Let's circle back to our original question and see if we can piece this puzzle together. What exactly is a flood myth anyway? First, there's the very real possibility of ancestral memory. A couple of geologists, William Ryan and Walter Pittman, had this famous idea that maybe the flood myths from the Near East are actually a kind of distant cultural memory of a real event, the catastrophic flooding of the Black Sea Basin thousands and thousands of years ago. A real disaster, passed down for generations until it turned into a myth. Second, you've got the divine judgment angle. This is where the flood is basically a morality tale. It's a really powerful story for reinforcing a society's rules, right? It's a warning that bad behavior, whether that's being too noisy or wicked or disrespectful to nature, will eventually lead to world-ending consequences. And third, you can see the flood as a story of cyclical renewal.
In this view, the flood isn't just an ending, it's a violent but totally necessary beginning. It's a metaphor for washing away everything old and corrupt so that a new, clean, purified world can be born from the waters. So, which one is it? A memory of a real disaster, a moral lesson, a metaphor for rebirth? Well, here's the kicker. The answer isn't pick one. The real answer is it's all of them. A single flood myth can be everything at once. A real disaster can be remembered and then retold as a moral lesson about why we needed a fresh start. These ideas aren't mutually exclusive at all.
And once you get that, you start to realize these aren't just some ancient, dusty stories collecting cobwebs. No, they're more like windows, giving us a direct look into the soul of the cultures that created them.
Ultimately, these myths are kind of like cultural DNA. By looking at what a flood story chooses to focus on, is it divine power, human ingenuity, or ecological balance, we can see exactly what that society thought was most essential for survival when faced with an absolute world-ending catastrophe. So when the world ends, what does the story focus on? Does it talk about the power that destroyed everything? Or does it highlight the strength that allowed a few people to endure and rebuild? Is it about the judgment that came from the sky or the resilience that grew up from the mud? Which, of course, leads us to one last pretty big thought. If a great flood came today, and a story were told about it 1,000 years from now, what would that story say about our values? Who or what would we blame? And maybe most important of all, who would we choose as our heroes?